Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on the topic of marketing generalist versus marketing specialist. My name is Renee Petey, and I'm from Strive. And for those of you who don't know us, we're your one-stop shop for everything from curated professional development content to coaching, mentoring, networking, and courses. So I just want to kick off today's session by acknowledging that I'm hosting this webinar from the lands of the Kulin Nation. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you will all work today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this meeting webinar. A little bit of housekeeping before we kick off. So this event will be recorded and it'll be accessible via Strive and socials following the session. Please feel free to put questions and comments in the chat as we go, and we will be answering those during the course of today's session. And we'd love to know what everyone thinks. And we have a great Q&A session at the end of the panel discussion. So I would just like to hand over to our two wonderful panelists today to introduce themselves. We have Jennifer Hankin, who is VP of Marketing at Record Point, and Jane Merrick, Marketing Director at Intuit. So Jen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks, Renee. Appreciate it. Hi, I'm Jen Hankin. I am an American who has lived here in Australia for the last 12 years. My kind of 20 plus career really spans the globe through different companies and different marketing roles. As Renee mentioned, I'm currently the marketing leader at Record Point, an enterprise B2B SaaS company with a data governance and privacy platform, selling into kind of highly regular organizations across the globe, like your NAB, Transfer New South Wales, NDI, City of New York as some examples. My career has kind of ebbed and flowed. Always kind of that marketing generalist is an underlying theme. Done everything from product marketing at publishing companies, a stint in employment branding, through kind of my current career era, as I call it, really focus on that B2B SaaS technology, really working with early to mid-stage companies, helping to build out their marketing strategy and operations. Fantastic. And I'm based here in Melbourne.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That sounds like such an interesting career history. And over to you, Jane.
Thanks, Renee, and thanks, Jen, and hi, everyone. So my name is Jane Merrick. I'm the Marketing Director here at Intuit QuickBooks in Australia. Intuit is a huge global organisation, market leader in mainly, accounting software is what we're well known for in Australia, but in the US, very focused on tax and financial management products. And our sort of key audience as we're trying to sell through is to accountants and small businesses. I've been with Intuit for about 2.5, nearly 3 years. Before that, I have primarily worked for, both actually local and global organisations such as American Express, Vodafone, IAG, and a couple of other sort of Australian-based organisations. I'm really enjoying getting back into a global company at the moment. The majority of my career actually was on really B2C marketing, but within this role, it's really moving into that B2B SaaS-based organisational activity. And I've been leading marketing teams for a long time. I started off as a specialist. I would now sort of call myself a generalist, and I can go into a little bit about my journey as we go through today. Based in sunny Sydney, it's a beautiful day here today, and looking forward to the conversation.
Fantastic. So the great debate, marketing generalist versus marketing specialist. So let's dive in and dissect the key question. When is it best to embrace one path over the other? So today's conversation with you both will help us go over some of the pros and cons of the approach, and keen to hear your insights. So question of the day, if you could turn back time, would you choose to specialize in a specific area of marketing or remain a generalist? Who would like to kick off and answer that question?
Well, I'll jump in, and maybe I can talk a little bit about my journey, because I feel like I was a specialist and then have become a generalist. And so, I'm sort of in the both camps. But the sort of beginning of my career, probably for the first 10 or 15 years or so, was really on CRM and data-driven marketing and direct marketing, when it wasn't cool at all. Data-driven marketing was always like the poor cousin compared to brand and sponsorship and all sort of those more interesting, fun sides of marketing. And I spent a lot of my time looking at customer lifecycle management, data-driven marketing, retention focus, and really sort of that customer engagement activity. And it was probably, I'd been doing that for quite a while. And I remember my boss at the time, when there was an opportunity that came up to lead our head of brand within the organisation that I'd been with for a little while. So I had some credibility. He came to me and he said, "Jane, I think you could move into this head of brand role." And I said at the time, "I don't want to move into brand. You can't measure. It's hard to measure. It's a bit more emotional. I sort of need to be on the rational side. This is where my skill sets are on the sort of data-driven path." Anyway, so I declined the role, and then we brought somebody else in, and then that sort of didn't work out for a little while. And he came back again and said, "I think you should do this role." And, credit to him for actually seeing the potential in me to be able to get out of my comfort zone and do something different. I moved into the role. And I think for me, that was actually sort of a career changing opportunity, to getting out of my comfort zone, out of my specialist area, moving into leading a team where I did have brand specialists, and I did have really those people that had some of that core skill set. And I'm very grateful that I learned a lot from my team over that time. But I think that what that allowed me to do was really see both sides of the marketing, the art and the science piece, and actually give me a much broader perspective of what successful marketing looks like, what commercial outcomes that we're looking for, and when you can combine, I guess, the full end of the spectrum and the full end of the funnel type of activity. So for me, that really helped me and really helped my trajectory into then sort of leading marketing teams, which I've been doing for quite a long time. So I think at the time it was really jumping out of that comfort zone and taking a risk. But certainly that worked for me. And, I know in hindsight, there are key reasons why that worked for me as far as what motivates me and what drives me. So I feel grateful that I had that opportunity to have both those specialist roles, which I did, really sort of hone that craft skill, and then got the opportunity to dive in it and have a more broader view, which has led me to where I am at the moment.
I agree with you on that whole piece of brand being this thing where it's, in terms of the measurement and everything, let's face it, stems back to KPI. So it does become this kind of tenuous sort of space where you sort of kind of go, how is that measured? But I do think that coming from that whole life cycle management, really, no one would understand, your data points and the customers better with that sort of background. It's such a strong background.
Thanks.
All right. So another question I've got, as a marketer, how do you personally decide whether to focus on becoming a generalist or a specialist? And I suppose this is done fairly early on, while either, you're studying or, in the early sort of stages of your career. When do you think, or, what are those points that help you uncover where you should start? Do you start as a specialist? Do you start as a generalist? Is it sort of based on your interest in a particular area? Any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think it stems back to college, to university, essentially. And, what I've definitely seen is, you study in marketing, but when I went to school, there wasn't a digital marketing degree, for instance, in digital as a channel. And so it's really thinking about, do you choose to be a specialist or generalist, or when you graduate, do you take what jobs available, rather than having potentially an intentional path going forward? And then how do you then, after, a period of years, just continue to decide on that path, being that generalist versus that specialist? I see what out in the market, I've been actively growing my team at Record Point, and what I've seen is there's not a lot of early career or mid-career generalists that I've seen out there. A lot of people are, with the advent of digital and the concept of growth marketing, really want to specialize, and they see that as the path to growth, versus more brand communication marketing or marketing generalists out there. So it's almost like the industry and the methodologies that we're using in marketing are pushing people potentially to be more specialists, rather than saying, actually, generalist is a great career path as well. And there's a lot of value that marketing generalists can give to companies and organizations. I think it's really making a decision about what does the individual like? Do they like just doing one little patch? Or like for me, I like doing a lot of different things, and I like the variety of it, and the orchestration of those different elements coming together. And that's really probably my passion for marketing generalists, is that ability to see all the different parts of marketing and how they come together to orchestrate to really influence business outcomes.
I agree with you, Jen. And it also depends sometimes, in the first few roles of your career, are you starting out in a large organization where you have that visibility and scope to see other people actually, in terms of the roles that they're in, and getting that kind of visibility and exposure, I think it can be really important, but that's, not open to everyone as well. So I also do think that digital marketing is so sexy, right? Let's face it. So I can understand why people might want to potentially specialize in that sort of field, in those sorts of digital marketing skill sets during university or in the first few years of their career as well. So if we are...
I might just build on something that Jen said, actually, which, when I was thinking about this conversation and reflecting, something around what actually drives you and what actually motivates you, because that is where you're going to do well. And so as Jen said, as some of us are driven by being really amazing at that particular craft and actually being an expert in that craft and having that sort of deep knowledge. And I think that's a really individual choice as to what drives you and what motivates you. A few years ago, when I was doing some sort of coaching and different sort of, what motivates me and what drives me, one of the key things that came out that drove me was variety. And I sort of knew that in, probably subconsciously around moving into that generalist role. But then when it came out that actually that was the thing that keeps me motivated, that echoes the sentiment for me around the generalist piece versus specialist for me. However, I think it's very different and individual based on what that sort of self-motivation and that self-drive and how you measure success off the back of that as to what is something that you enjoy and you're passionate about, and can really grow based on that.
Fantastic.
And I think just supporting that, giving early stage marketers an opportunity to find that path, because they're not going to know, like what Jane said, do they prefer this or do they prefer the other? And how do we give them that opportunity to find their feet and to make that decision rather than, I guess, pigeonholing coming out of school? Like, I in one part wanted to be like a political campaign marketer, go work on in politics. And then I thought I wanted to work in PR. And it took me a bit through courses and through internships to decide, okay, this is what I really want to do. But I've also ebbed and flowed in my career. But that, usually you get that T-shaped where you're good at a lot of different things, but then you've got that specialty in a few different things. And that's an okay path as well.
I suppose it's a bit of a mix of what drives you, what are you good at, what are you interested in, what do you get exposed to, all of those things. So interesting. We've just had a few questions come in from the audience. So we'll look at the first one here. So that's come in. What side do you think career progression and remuneration favours, being a true generalist or a specialist in your field? That's a great question. Would anyone like to tackle that one?
You go, Jane.
No, I think you can do well looking at both, to be honest. Like, if I think of some specialists that have such core skill sets that it might be quite unique and special, those types of people are remunerated very well. This might be sometimes more in engineering or IT, or at the moment, a lot of data science. And if I think about those specialists and those sort of skill sets, their career trajectory of those people is pretty good, and you are remunerated very well for those types of things. I think it also depends on your career goals as to where you want to go. And if you are inclined to be moving into more of a broader leadership role and you feel that though that is aligned with progression and remuneration, my view, and maybe it's biased based on my experience, is generalist has helped me in that respect, because I've been able to move up and look after sort of a greater number of functions or a greater breadth of role, and sit on sort of senior leadership teams, which enable me, as Jen said, with that T-shaped leadership, to have both functional, but then, cross country. I sit on our sort of country leadership team here, which has, been aligned with my career progression. So I think it's hard, because I think, once again, it has to come back to what you're passionate about and what your skill set is there, because I think the money follows success, and career progression or remuneration follows that sort of passion and what you're good at. But I think there's certainly cases on both sides. But once again, what is the thing that appeals to you, and what can you do well at? And then I think you follow that path, and then the remuneration follows that.
Yeah, we've just had another comment in. I love the point about what motivates you. What do you really enjoy? And then kind of working out the next pathway based on that. It's all based on exposure, isn't it? In terms of, learning what you're good at, what you have a talent in, what motivates you, what you're really enjoying, and sort of building from there. So the next question I have is, what specific skills and qualities do you look for when you're hiring marketing generalists? And this might be an interesting one in terms of some of those soft skills as well.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a lot of soft skills that come into it. It's probably that strategic mindset. So really be able to understand how the different parts of a marketing function work together. I mentioned this before, to influence business outcomes. And I see that as being really, really important, and in a way, that people who are successful at marketing generalists do that really, really well. And so that's something, they've got baseline knowledge, and then be able to understand the orchestration and that campaign orchestration, the team orchestration together. And then it's the soft skills of how do they get everybody on the same page? How do they bring everybody along in that journey? And how do they leverage specialists to help them in a generalist role?
Fantastic. No, I agree as well. I just think soft skills, and it's one of those things that is becoming so, in terms of your growth as a marketing leader, really understanding and unpacking some of those soft skills and working out what your key development points are is so important as well, but often I think overlooked.
I think there's something in there really around mindset and potential. I think you can, have great skills on paper, and then, what I see at the moment, the more junior people that come into our team, or sort of starting off their careers, it's really a mindset. So they will come in for a particular role, because everyone comes in on a particular role that might be, have some form of capabilities that are skewed towards one thing or another. But actually, once they're in the organisation and start to develop those relationships, it's really around how are they, managing stakeholders, how are they building relationships, how are they looking for new and different opportunities. And actually, how are they working closely with their manager in order to really identify, okay, what are those key interests or passions or opportunities outside of their core role, to be able to then give people opportunities outside of that, which then I think leads to growth. We've had a number of people that have come in that, might be very specialist on this, but then start to sort of expand their scope, as build trust and confidence, and really try and just have that mindset of trying something different. And I think there's something in here around when you start to shift out of your specialist role, if you want to do that, what's the level of risk that you're willing to take to get out of your comfort zone. And, my sort of coaching, and I always think we should be taking risks. And I think, for me, that was a catalyst for me when I moved into the brand role, because I think I sat down to do my next sort of 12-month plan that I'd done for the last 3 years, and thought, I don't know if I can do this. I just don't have the motivation to drive it. And so taking a risk to push out of a comfort zone really leads to something. And that's just being confident in yourself, because I think a lot of people also don't think they've got that capability, but most people do. And being able to, just push yourself and take some risks. And more often than not, I think it's often going to pay off, certainly in the earlier stages of your career.
Fantastic. The next question I have is, can you provide some examples of successful marketing teams that effectively blend generalist and specialist roles, and what lessons can we learn from their experiences? Would anyone like to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, I've got both different sides in my team at the moment. I mean, I think we definitely have specialist roles that, we've certainly in-house media activities, data analytics, coding, like web developers. So a lot of quite specialist roles. And then I've got sort of more generalists, like more commercial roles or segment managers or brand managers, which I would probably put into that sort of broader space. And I think the beauty of when you can actually put the different sort of thinking together, because I think everyone has different perspectives. And even yesterday we had, we've got a business challenge that we're trying to face, and we put a group of people in a role and in a room, and one of our key web developers, very specialist, came up with a great idea that will help our commercial outcomes, actually. And so it's actually I think it's the blend of two to be able to give you both some depth, but also breadth to, I guess, address creative challenge or address problems in a creative way when you can harness those different types of skill sets and different thinking, because it's really pushing everyone out of their normal thought process. And I think it's important to have the balance, but it's also really important to make sure that people are working well together and not creating silos because of the specialist type of activities or not understanding each other's craft is a really important, I guess, team engagement, responsibility to be able to drive that, to drive that environment that enables people to have that flexibility.
So it's those sort of brainstorming sessions and strategy sessions where almost like those all-in sessions where people can contribute and hear from other people. Specialists quite often have those sorts of customer insights and also access to different types of innovative solutions that other people in the team might not necessarily be exposed to, and the people that are right deep with the customer insights as well. Jennifer, we have people in the audience who live in the tech startup world. How do you approach this in the startup scene when you are hiring? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. So, I come from a perspective of being in much smaller organizations and marketing teams in the last part of my journey. And it's having been in a lot of startups, the automatic focus for most CEOs or founders are like, we need a growth marketer, we need a digital marketer. But what they actually need is a generalist who can really span the breadth of everything that they need done, especially if they're the first or the second person within the marketing team. And that's really, really important. And I think that's where marketing generalists can really fit when they are in these early to mid-stage companies, when you have to wear a lot of hats, when potentially you don't have the funding to have all the specialist skills, and where you kind of augment out externally to get those specialist skill sets. And I think there's just a lot of need, but I think that it's convincing the founders that what they see and what's sexy is not necessarily what they actually need and what's practical for their business right now.
And I suppose especially in the startup world, those first sort of key hires are so important. You're making them slowly and
100%.
Pardon?
And if you think about it from a go-to-market perspective, you've got a variety of different people in your go-to-market team, but it's not just marketing, it's product, it's sales. And how do you work together go-to-market in an early stage company when you're either, pre or post product market fit, you've made your first X amount of revenue target. And that's where marketing generalists can come in and say, how do I orchestrate and work cross-functionally? How do I know enough to kind of shift the needle? And then when do I know enough to actually go find something specific in this skill set that I need help with?
100%. We've just had a question come in from the audience. So that is, what's the best way to sell your skills as a generalist without coming across as too broad or unfocused? It's a great question. Would anyone like to tackle that one?
I mean, I've faced. Oh, do you want to go, Jen?
No, you go.
I mean, I've faced this actually previously. So I guess the way that I've, when sometimes, you might be out looking for a job and says, what type of job, what are you looking for? And you go, oh, I sort of, I really want to do this, or I like to look at this, or actually I'm pretty flexible and I can do this. And that really doesn't help anyone that you're talking to help you find another role. So my sort of thought on this is that everyone started off with some sort of foundational area that you've gone into, whether it could be brand or communications or data analytics. There's something in there that's probably grounding you and something that you're more aligned and more passionate with. And so for me, it was getting very clear around what are those sort of top 5 things that either I was looking for in my next role or that I was very clear on what my skill sets were. And I think you can sort of hone them down, and you can do the exercise, you go from 100 down to 50, down to 20, down to 5, down to that, to actually be very clear around what it is that either you're looking for, which then enables you to be able to showcase what your skill sets are. So to me, it's actually, if you're selling yourself, you're looking for a new opportunity or you're looking for something different, and grounding in what are those top 3 to 5 things that you are good at. And I think that really starts to paint a picture to whoever you're talking to about the type of role or the type of person that you are and where your motivations lie. So I think it's just getting very clear on those conversations and grounding yourself in a couple of key areas. And you can experiment with that, actually. You can experiment with, conversations with this person on that area or this person on that area, and so see where it leads. But I would, not everyone can do everything all of the time. So I would probably think about those top 3 to 5 skills that you can talk to, that you've got, either you're passionate about or you've got your experience in.
Fantastic. So from experience, how have you helped your team members with career progression if they want to transition from generalists to specialists or vice versa? Does anyone want to take that one? Jen, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, I think it's being able to afford the opportunity and have the opportunity. I think that you'll find a lot more of those, the back and forth in larger organizations, like Jane is in, but it's that encouraging. It's if somebody wants to go from a specialist to a generalist, and I see a lot of that. Those skills need to come around strategy, around understanding business outcomes outside of their patch. So how can you expose them more to those elements? How can you give them little bits of work and a little bit more responsibility to make that push, into the generalist level? And then vice versa, if they're generalists and want to do specialists, what are the skills and competencies that they need to learn? What is the additional training? And then giving them that space and room for growth.
Things like stretch projects and all those sorts of opportunities
exactly.
are, great options for people. So we will pop it out now to the audience for anyone that is watching and wants to ask a question. And if we don't receive any more questions, we can probably, some key takeouts from you guys maybe to finish up. Jane, would you like to kick off with some sort of key takeaways or from today's event?
Yeah, sure. So I think there's a couple of key takeaways or sort of key thoughts from me. So I think one, as we're all going through our career, what sort of worked for me or what I've seen work for others is probably, there's a couple of key areas. So one is like take some risks. So you might think that you can only do this because you've only ever done that. That doesn't determine your future. So I think about something, and it's funny, like I've had people, that's happened to me as I explained, but also I've tried to encourage and push people in my teams to do something that they never thought that they could do, actually. Like this, take on this project, have a look. Oh, no, I can't do that. That's not my skill set. That's not my core thing. But you can see potential and push them, and then they achieve. And, that's such a great growth opportunity. So I think take some risks out of your comfort zone and try something that's different. I think, be very clear on what motivates and drives you. So if you you like to go deep and you like to get very focused, and that's how you feel rewarded and motivated, then that's really great. That's exactly something that's going to work for you. And if you like variety, then push yourself in different things. So I think it's all very individual. And I think the other thing is just, seize opportunities when they come to you. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to have everything. Nothing is linear all the time, that you keep growing. And so I think we've had a lot of, forward and back in our careers and move up and sideways. And I think just taking advantage of those opportunities that come to you.
That's fantastic. And I think, being able to talk to your team about your own career history and, moving from that very specialist to the generalist opportunity when you didn't feel maybe that was the logical next step for you in your career, and how that has sort of paid off for you. All right. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jane. And Jen, any last thoughts from you?
I think just the last thought is that, and I don't think people hear that enough, like it's okay to be a marketing generalist. And I think that in a world of hyper specialization, generalists can succeed in their careers just as great as specialists. And that it's all about, like Jane referenced earlier, it's about telling the story and that career progression, and how do you sell yourself and tell that story about why marketing generalists can aid, the organization that you're interviewing for.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you to you both for the panel today. Really appreciated your, talking through your career histories and some of the key insights. And thank you to everyone watching today. So if you are keen to hear more from Striven, just check out our website, and we'll pop some more details online and in the comments for you. And that's it for today. Thank you so much to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.